Today, I'm going to take you on a journey to what a dreamer's life looks like, what a visionary's life looks like. And I'm going to focus specifically on my story. So before we get into that, I want to talk about all of your journeys to becoming a rebel banker. That journey is filled with all sorts of ways to get knowledge. One thing I want to clarify is it's not the knowledge that's the important part. It's the application of the knowledge. That's what matters. I wouldn't be where I'm at if I didn't apply the knowledge that I've learned along the way. And also, I wouldn't be where I'm at without the failures that I've had to go through. I want to give you something for free. So I've got this brand new booklet. It's Drifting Away from Traditional Car Buying. It's a guide that basically tells you how to get all the money back for all the cars you're ever going to buy driving home. Just go to chrisnaugle.com and click the Wealth Webinar Series, which is a weekly webinar we do. And as soon as you click to register, there's no cost. We will send you that booklet for free. That is how you take action. So when I was a kid, I grew up in a lower middle class family. My dad was an alcoholic. My mom had to raise me. It was a huge struggle for her. And in growing up like that, you know, there was a lot of things that maybe I wanted. There was a picture of a Porsche on the wall, just like every young boy has. And one of the big things I always wanted was when I first was turned on to snowboarding by my friend Jack. We rode four-wheelers and dirt bikes together, and we skateboarded together. And he was the first that I knew that had been snowboarding. And he comes over with his new board, and we're out in my mom's garage, and we're just bouncing around on this thing. And I'm like, oh my God, this is cool. And then he started showing me some videos. I'm watching the VHS tape of these professional snowboarders, and I'm like, that is freedom. They're blasting through the snow in Hawaii. They're out in Colorado, just, you know, dropping off of cliffs and hitting jumps. And I'm just like, that's so unbelievable. But I'd never snowboarded in my life. So that Christmas, my mom bought me a used Look Burt Lamar, which if any of you know anything about snowboarding, we're going way back, you know, and that used Burt Lamar was way expensive for my mom. I think she spent like $150 on it. Plus then I had to get my Sorel boots and I had to get the outerwear. As that dream progressed, you know, the first day I was on the snowboarding hill, truth be told, how I started was not going to the resorts because we didn't have the money to go to the resorts. How many of you have ever wanted to do something, but the means just aren't there? The resources just aren't there. Well, that was my story. I would take that snowboard, I'd walk up the street or ride my four-wheeler up there, and there was a hill. It was a kind of a dirt bike track down, and there was a hill that went down there. So we'd build jumps, and we'd hit that jump and learn how to do certain tricks or just mostly crash back then because I didn't even know how to snowboard. And then I remember one day, my best friend Jack said, hey, come to Kissing Bridge, which was our local small resort, and let's go snowboarding. I'm like, oh my God, yeah. So I pulled together enough money. Mom gave me a little bit of money, and I drove down with him, and we went snowboarding. And I'll never forget that first run. I sucked. I remember I couldn't figure it out. I just wanted to quit. And I remember getting to the bottom. I'm soaked from sitting in the snow and being wet. And if I'm not mistaken, it was a rainy day. And I'm in the lodge and I'm like, I don't think I can do this. And Jack comes down. He's like, hey, let's do another run. I'm like, I don't know. And he says, listen, I'll take some time this time teaching you how to do this. He taught me some key fundamentals, some key things that once it clicked, I started to understand it. And then after that, I just progressed. And I kept watching the videos of these legendary pros and what they were doing. And I remember watching them do the tricks. And I would, at school, I'd write down all the tricks and I'd draw pictures of myself doing these tricks, methods and stalefish and 180s and all these things, which today aren't big tricks, but back then those were the pinnacle things you had to do. I still wanted to ride and I wanted to learn. So there was this country club by my house, and this country club was built in a ravine. So just picture a ravine, right? And on the ravine going down the hills, there was Sandtraps. You've been to a golf course, you know what a Sandtrap is. So I had figured out one day while watching sledders out there, I saw sledders like going from the top of the hill and going through the sand pit, and they were jumping their sleds. And I'm like, oh my God, that's the perfect jump for a snowboard. And I didn't see any snowboarders doing this. So I went to the country club with my board, and I built on the back side of the country club where there wasn't a bunch of sledders because I didn't want any distractions and I didn't want people laughing at me because I was still concerned about people like judging me. And I built a jump out of that sand trap. And I'd go there and I'd practice all those tricks that I saw in those videos. So I'd get out of school at 2:30. Mom would basically then, when I got dropped off by the bus, take me to the country club, which was about 10 minutes from my house. So I had about an hour to an hour and a half each day that I went to the country club to master these tricks. Just wasn't enough time. I wasn't in shape enough to actually hit it, run back up the hill, hit it again. So I had to get in shape. So I remember when I get really winded, I'd have to stop and wait until I got my wind back to hit the jump again. And by that time, it was getting dark, and mom, I heard her beeping the horn. She was over on the other side, ready to pick me up. I'm like, oh my God, I only got 3 runs. So I went home and I started running up and down my backyard to get in shape. And then I remember I signed up for wrestling in school because I knew during the off season in wrestling, they did a lot of running and it was good conditioning. So I got in really good shape. The next time I went to that country club, I had a longer list of tricks because I'd watched more videos that season. Because every year after the snowboard season, we went into withdrawal. But we basically just went into video watching mode. Me and Jack and some of my other friends like Ben and Billy, we'd just sit down and we'd watch VHS tapes of our favorite pro snowboarders doing even better tricks than they did the year before. And we got all these new ideas, but then we had to practice. So what we would do is we'd go to the country club and we'd build this jump. Usually it was just me. We'd build this jump and I would run up the hill. I had more stamina than all my friends and I just got more runs. I got more hits. It's just like so many of the other people that you've seen that have become legends. What they did is they just did what everybody else was unwilling to do. They got more runs. They spent more time in the computer lab if you're Bill Gates. They spent more time on the court if you're Michael Jordan. They just did what everybody was unwilling to do. And that's what I did. I was so driven to become a pro snowboarder. And I knew I didn't have the luxury of just going to the resort and practicing on a real mountain. So I had to actually improvise and become resourceful. A lot of times we went to the country club, there wasn't even enough snow. So we were riding on part dirt, part grass, part snow. We would take snow from other parts of the hill, bring it over just so we had an in run to the jump. But the landing, there wasn't enough snow to make that landing perfect. So it turned into mud. I didn't care. It was all about doing the trick and mastering it. And that's what I did. And as this progressed, I started then being able to take those tricks I'd learned at that country club and then take them to the real hill every Sunday for that ski club. And I'd get to practice on real jumps. And I got pretty good. And then I started competing. And my mom would drive me to the hill now, and she'd walk up the hill and watch me compete. And, at the first couple of competitions, I was so scared. It's just like, you get there and there's all these other riders and they're doing these big tricks and older guys. And you're like, okay. And you just got into the groove, but you were scared to like fall and everything else. But then you got over that really quick because some of those older riders would kind of be like, yeah, man, you got it. Get up there. Let's do it again. And then you watch them and you start mimicking what they did. And you see, this is how it all manifests. But you see, it started with that dream, that day in the garage with Jack, bouncing around on that snowboard. I got the idea. I got the dream, like, I want this. And then seeing the path. After you got the dream, that's one thing, but then you need to break it into small bite-sized pieces. I actually went and practiced. And I practiced it over and over again until I had it perfect. Until that crossbone or that method looked exactly like Terry Hawkinson's or like Jamie Lynn's. But then, at that point, that's great. You can get good at tricks. You can get good at riding. You can start winning some contests. But what happens next? The next thing is the realization that you are going to be a pro. It's not an idea anymore. In your mind, it's concreted. I am going to be a professional snowboarder. And when that moment switches, when that light switch goes off in your mind, that's when everything starts to get difficult. Because at that very moment, when you actually crystallize your dream and you start telling other people what you're going to do, other people come out of the woodwork to break that dream down and actually beat you off of that pedestal, that good feeling, that dopamine, if you will. And I remember some of those people were my father. Some of those people were just my friends at school that said, you can't be a pro. You live in Buffalo, New York. How are you ever going to be a professional snowboarder? We don't have mountains. If I'm going to become a pro, I got to stop listening to these people. So literally a lot of my friends, because I was wrestling and I was trying to do the football thing, all of them were the ones that, they would just shit on my dreams. They would just say, no, you don't want to do that. Play football, become a varsity wrestler. I remember my wrestling coach, and I was in good shape because I focused all my attention on conditioning so I could snowboard and hit jumps more. He knew I loved snowboarding more than anything, but my snowboarding on the weekends got in the way of the varsity competitions. At the beginning of wrestling, it flowed into the snowboard season. And I remember this coach said to me, he says, if you're going to we want you to move up to the varsity wrestling team. And if you're going to do that, you have to quit this snowboarding thing because it gets in the way of your wrestling. I was just a wrestler just to get in shape for snowboarding. It was an off-season thing so that I was in good shape. So when snowboarding happened, I could hike that hill faster. Then all of a sudden, this wrestling coach tells me that I should quit snowboarding. I think you know what happened. I quit wrestling. Just like that. That person got in the way of my dream. I eliminated that person. And they were upset. And all my other wrestling friends were just like, I can't believe you quit. What do you mean you can't believe I quit? This is my goal. This is my dream, not wrestling. Wrestling was just a means to keep me in shape to do my dream and my goal. Every person that got in my way, I had to make a decision. It's either my dream or their dream. And folks, there was a pivotal moment. I wasn't even an amateur at that point. I was just a shop rider. And it was cool. I got discounts on boards and stuff, and I worked at the shop, so I had money, to pay for the snowboarding stuff. And in the summer, I'd work on a farm, and Jack's dad's farm, where we would basically pick, fruits and vegetables. And then I'd also go over to another one, and I'd clean out pig stalls. Listen, I did whatever it took, because those summer months were just so that I raised enough money. And I remember I had a little black box my mom got me. So remember, my mom never had any money, but my mom was a great saver. She had a little glass jar that she kept in her closet. And I remember my mom would always teach me this. When she needed a new lawnmower or she needed money for something, she taught me that she would take all of her extra change and put it in this glass jar. And one day she bought me this black box. I still have it today, and a little slide top. Just imagine a black box, a wooden box, and the top just slid back and forth. And she said, when you work at the farm, give me whatever money you don't need to put fuel in the dirt bike and whatever other things, and I'll save that for you like I saved for the lawnmower. I started doing that. And at the end of the summer, when I was working at various restaurants, at the farm, or working at the snowboard shop, which started in the fall, it's perfect. The snowboard shop, I would work after school during the week when I wasn't snowboarding. So I was in the moment. I was around snowboarding every second. I was around people that thought like me, not the people that I was wrestling with that didn't have the same dream as me. See, I had to change the network of people that I spent time with so that that network was in line with my goals. Do you understand what I'm telling you? Don't let anyone stop you from your dreams. And if they do, if it's your family or your loved ones, you just got to put them in timeout. Draw the line in the sand. You see, I changed my network of people that I surrounded myself with because it was in line with what I wanted. And as that happened, things started progressing. Where if I was really going to make this push to become a pro snowboarder, go from a shop rider to an amateur to a pro, I had to make a big push. So me and Ben worked at the snowboard shop together. It was very rare that I had saved enough money during the summer months that I could afford my car insurance, the fuel, and all the other little things that I had to do. We didn't have cell phones back then, we had pagers, but let alone then be able to afford $50, $60 lift tickets. God, they're hundreds today, but that just wasn't in the budget. So what me and Ben figured out is, well, if we didn't have the money for the tickets, we could just hike. Most of the snowboard contests were half pipes and slopestyle things, but snowboarding wasn't mainstream. So the resorts would just put those at the bottom of the hill, way off on the side. So for us, we just had to hike up just a little ways up the hill, hit the half pipe, walk back up the half pipe and do it again. We got in really good shape. That's what we did. But we would drive on a Friday night. My mom hated it. She was so nervous because, what if we fell asleep? She'd make me this big cup of coffee, this thermos of coffee that we would drink, and we'd drive all night. And I did this weekend after weekend. And we'd get there Saturday, we'd compete Saturday, we'd find friends, we made friends and we'd sleep on their couches. And then the next morning we'd get up and compete again. We'd stop it for dinner, somewhere on the way home when we got tired, and we'd drive all the way home Sunday so that Monday we could be back in school and back at the shop working. And as I did this and I stayed focused and I kept my network in line with my goals, what started happening is I started getting better rankings as the rider. And then I remember there was one day back at my local resort, they had just built a brand new snowboard park. It was revolutionary for Buffalo. And it had buses that were buried in the snow and all sorts of jumps. And Burton Snowboards, the biggest snowboard company of the time back then, and even today, had two riders. And I had learned that these two guys, Blair and Shane, were from Buffalo, New York. And I'm like, oh my God, there's two pros, big pros that are in the videos we're watching that were Buffalo guys that made it. They didn't live in Buffalo anymore. They'd moved to California, but now I had a real case study of somebody that had done it. And then I found out that they were going to have these two riders there with a professional photographer shooting for a video. And I'm like, oh my God, this is a dream come true. So I made sure that I was at the resort that day. And I remember being up in the snowboard park and I saw these two riders decked out in Burton gear. I didn't know who they were. And I saw them hitting this stuff and I'm like, oh my God, they're so good. Now, I was a good rider, but these guys were, in my eyes, they were superstars. And I watched them, and I sat by the jumps when the filmers were there, out of the way, and I watched them, and I high-fived them, and they'd come up, and they were super friendly, and they told me, hey, come on up and hit the jump with us. And I did that, and I was a pretty good rider, so they noticed it, like, oh, you're pretty good. But at that time, something else happened. What I didn't know is there was a scout, which is a team manager, okay, for one of the other companies, not for Burton, but there was a team manager there. And that would happen every once in a while when there was a big photo shoot. Team managers would show up and look at the talent that was there, because it wasn't just Blair and Shane hitting this. There was a bunch of other riders too. And I just was doing my thing, and I was having a ton of fun doing great tricks. And I remember he pulled me aside and he said, hey, I'd love to, talk to you more about riding for XXX snowboards. Now, at this time, I was a shop rider. I had a pro form deal with K2 snowboards, which means I got K2 boards at cost. But now this guy, his name was Chad. Chad had offered me an amateur sponsorship with this company called XXX Snowboards. And they were going to give me snowboards. They were going to give me gloves and stickers and outerwear later. And I eventually took the deal and I started riding with XXX. Well, at this time, I'd been competing and I'd been winning. And I ignored all the naysayers, and I took all those negative people that were muddying up my mindset. I got them out of my life. And I started, now I had a purpose. I had a sponsor that I had to prove something to. So I started winning all the contests. I started actually showing up to photo shoots, because now I kind of saw that that's the thing to do. When there's photo shoots that you hear of, you drive and you go to the photo shoot. So I drive to Vermont, not for a contest, but because there was a big photo shoot, and I'd just be in the right place at the right time. And eventually I went pro for this company. And then XXX unfortunately went out of business a few years later, but then that team manager moved to another company, which was Limited, and Limited then signed me on, which was still really good. I got to surround myself with the pros for Limited snowboards, and I went to their offices in Toronto. They gave me boards. It was awesome, such an awesome time. But I was doing really well at this point. And then I remember when Limited sold to another company, I no longer had a sponsorship. You see, I'd get one, and then that company would go belly up. But then that team manager, who was always true to me, that was that one person. If you've ever watched the movie Rudy, remember he had that janitor who always believed in him. Well, this team manager always believed in me. And he went to another company called Option. Option NFA was the name of the company. NFA was the clothing line, and Option Snowboards was the snowboard company. And at that moment, I had my big break. I had been doing really well. I was ranked, I think, like number 13 in the country, for USSA. I was competing all over. I was filming with some of the biggest photographers and videographers in the industry, but back then they were at the early stages of their career. But I had been filming with them out in Vermont, Maine, New Hampshire, as I was an amateur rider. So you can see, folks, this is many, many years that I stayed focused to this. Many, many years of people telling me that this was a false reality. This wasn't going to happen. This was a joke, and that I shouldn't be doing this. And I gave my resume to Option, and they loved it. I had all my winnings on there. I printed off all the USSA stats, and I had a bunch of photos that had been done by these photographers. Back then, they were on little negatives, like I can't remember what they were called, but we would show them, and they put them on a light board. Things were different back then, but it was still just as exciting. And when I went pro, it was a whole different level. It'd be like a college football player then becoming a pro football player, getting drafted. And then all of a sudden they're such a good player as a college, but they're mediocre in the pro world. That was me. I was top of the game as an amateur rider, winning all the contests. But now all of a sudden I stepped into the pro level contest. And I would show up to contests that were sponsored by Red Bull, or, this is kind of the time when Monster was just coming into it. And all these big sponsored events, Mountain Dew. And I'd be there with all these pros. The Cast brothers were there. And I mean, there were so many names, Ross Powers. And the level they were at was far superior to where I was. But I had the ability to rise to that level. I just had to be in that environment where I was riding with them. Because when you're in an environment where you're at the top, you can only push yourself so hard and so far when everybody else is below you. But when you step into the next realm, which I did in the pro world, now everybody was better. So now I had to up my skills. I had to now go out there and actually be more resourceful and do what others are unwilling to do even more to get to that level. And that's what it did. I worked harder. I trained better. I got, I had better resources. I had people to now look at and admire, and we'd go and we'd practice with pros. So I'm riding in this pro world, and I'm riding with Cass, Maddie Cass, and Danny Cass, who was just a little kid, but I'm watching them do tricks I'd never seen. So then once I saw it, I practiced it. And then I would take it back home and I would just drill and practice, but the level of the tricks were up. They're way more complicated, way more dangerous. So that's when I ended up learning that you can get a trampoline and you could tape the edges of your snowboard with duct tape so that it didn't rip through the trampoline and you'd bounce. So all summer long, that's what I did. Every day with our snowboards, learning flips, learning backflips and rodeo flips and off-axis spins, which are called quirks. And we learned all those on a trampoline. And then when the snow came, I'll never forget the first snowflake that falls. We get so excited. You're just like a kid in a candy store. And then my mindset was in the right place. My network was in the right place. Now all I had to do is go out, take all that stuff, that feeling of practicing over and over and over again on a trampoline, and I just had to apply it to snow. And obviously you can only imagine, like, yes, it hurt. We'd build a jump and we'd mess up the landing with a bunch of extra snow so that when we'd first try it, usually it ended with landing on your back or your face. And all these tricks that I was practicing started on a trampoline. They started watching a video, getting an idea, or seeing one of the riders the year before do it, practicing all summer long, coming back, applying that to the snow and actually making it a reality. What I started realizing is this trick to competition riding wasn't having a whole bunch of really crazy tricks. It was having a good competition line, meaning having set tricks that you could do every day with your eyes closed, that you could do in a repetitious manner on the jumps and the handrails in the course. And that you could land them consistently. And your style was unmatched. And you weren't sloppy in the air. So there was so many criteria. You'd look at the judging format, and there was different things, amplitude, style. There was all sorts of different criteria that they would judge you on. And all you would do, is all I did, is I said, all right, well, if that's what they judge on, I just have to make sure that each one of those things is perfect. I have to go high enough. I have to have rotations in there. I have to grab the board. I have to have style. I can't be doing things sloppy. A lot of the riders were sloppy. They had big tricks, but they were sloppy. I just watched videos. I saw the best smooth riders. I keep going back to Teddy Hawkinson because he had one of the best styles. So did Jamie Lynn. And I just modeled everything I did off what they did. And then I basically just practiced over and over again. And in doing this, you see this is how the reality happened, folks. But so many people that have dreams and they chase their dreams and they get themselves in all these right places, they get the right network. There's one other thing that I always had to deal with as a pro snowboarder and on the journey to being a pro snowboarder, and that was called fear. Fear is something that is very difficult for me to articulate to you how you can handle fear. You see, fear isn't real, but in our minds, we make fear very real. Because at the moment, when you're thinking about crashing, you know the consequences now because you've dealt with them. You've crashed enough times to know, hey, that hurt. Hey, that could have went really bad. Hey, that could have paralyzed me. Hey, I could have blew my knee out. You understand those things. So you face fear. And let me tell you a story about one of the scariest moments in my career. It was right when I had become a pro snowboarder with option. They invited me to this contest in New Hampshire. And I remember it was a gloomy day. We got there, it was pouring rain. The contest day, I woke up really early because I'm like, I got to practice. Like, we don't have big jumps like this back home because I knew it was a big jump. So I'm on the lift, I'm going up nice and slow. It's so quiet that early in the morning. You're in your own space. You're so excited. I'm a pro rider. I've done it. This is a huge opportunity. If I win this contest, like, I'm going to make money because it was a cash purse. My sponsors are going to be happy. Maybe I'll get a better contract because contracts went, back then it was year after year. Every year they'd up your contract and up your pay or up your incentives. And I remember getting halfway up and the lift kind of comes over this knoll and the fog started dissipating because the higher up the fog was down low. And I remember coming up at this point and I looked over to my left. At that moment, I went from an excited, newly, honored pro snowboarder to a fearful snowboarder. One of the riders has to hit the jump first just to test it out, make sure it's safe, make sure everything's good, and then the contest can start. Maybe 15 riders were invited, to this contest. The rest were spectators, 15, 20. And I remember we'd always play this game, Rochambeau. I went rock, somebody else went paper. That means I lost and I had to hit this jump. So you roll up to the starting ramp of the jump, which is just a big drop in, and you're staring at the face of the jump, this giant face that you're going to take off and be launched 30, 40 feet in the air. And you're staring at this thing and you're thinking to yourself, if I go too fast and I overshoot that landing, which is about 70 feet, I could land flat. I could land halfway down. That's like falling 40 feet to the flat ground. That could get you paralyzed. Could blow your knees out, could put you out for the entire season. If you check your speed too much and you don't have enough speed to take it to the landing, you take off and you smash into the backside of that jump. And you're thinking through all these things and your fear is just going up and up and you're starting to think, oh my God, maybe I shouldn't hit this. But there's a lot at stake here. And then the starter walks up. He's got his headphones on, talking to the judges down the bottom. And he says, all right, Chris, you ready? And you look back and you say, yes, but you're not ready. But at that very moment, you have to make a decision. Now, I don't care if this is entrepreneurship. I don't care if this is a business. I don't care if this is a new job interview. I don't care if this is you making that big step to becoming what you have always wanted to. We all have to make a decision. And that decision is leap. And at that very moment, I leaped. And for the next, what felt like forever, but it was just split seconds, all the fear is gone. At that very moment, all those years of practice, all those videos you've watched, all those times you've practiced this trick on the trampoline and on the snow, instinct kicks in. Your practice, your training, and everything you've done to get you to this moment kicks in, and you do your trick and you land and right away. At that moment, fear is completely gone from your life. Fear is gone from your mind. Fear is gone from your heart. And it's overjoyed with excitement. The smile on your face is ear to ear. You're just so happy because now fear is gone and now everything is possible. And the next thing through your mind is get me up to the top of that hill so that I can do this trick and that trick, because now the world is yours. I've had to overcome fear. I've had to overcome objections. I've had to overcome the lack of resources. And some of the other pro riders came from wealthy families that just footed the bill for them to be everywhere and any time that they wanted to be, but that wasn't the case for me. And the lies that I was told my whole life, you can't do this. That's not possible because you don't have the resources. That's not possible because you don't live in an area where the mountains are, and you don't live in an area where all the other pros live. But I had those two guys that blazed the path, Blair and Shane. So all I really had to do is just have the dream. I had to dream it. I had to believe it. And then I was able to achieve it. And all of you can do the same thing. I have taken that exact same formula, that formula of getting rid of the hate in your life, getting rid of the people that want to bring you down, surrounding yourself with the right people and the right mindset that have your goals in mind or are just chasing the same thing you are. And I've applied that to business. And I'm not going to say I haven't failed. I failed in snowboarding, had countless injuries, big injuries. An injury took me out as a pro snowboarder when I was actually 34 years old. That was a long career. I was probably ready to go at that point. Not really. I mean, you just don't ever want to give that up. But sometimes life has a different path for you. Everything in life will be played out exactly how you allow it to play out. Because whatever you ask of life, life will give you. But the second you doubt it, the second you come up with reasons and excuses and tell yourself you can't do this, you shouldn't do this, it's too risky. If you start allowing your mindset to be muddied up by the naysayers, muddied up by the tricksters, the scammers, muddied up by the people that have failed dreams, that try to get you to conform to their failed realities, then you got to believe that it's possible. And then you got to go out there and do what everybody else is unwilling to do. You got to do the impossible, and you got to achieve your dreams. You're going to have resistance. You're going to have failures. You're going to have setbacks. You're going to have people telling you you can't do things. Stop listening to them. Stop blaming other people when something doesn't work. Folks, the cavalry's not coming to save the day. It's you that's going to save the day. It's you that's going to allow your dreams to happen. It's you that's going to allow that perfect day to happen, that dream to materialize, that vision that you've thought about for so long to actually happen. Stop believing the lies you're taught and start believing in yourself. So go out there and remember, it's not the knowledge that you get from this podcast or any other podcast. It's the application of knowledge. Make sure you smash, kind of like this, the thumbs up button, and make sure you subscribe to this channel for more amazing content. See you soon.